Hello again, it's Matt here, and this video is coming rather later than I intended to make it, and I'm going to go over how I keep track of which pieces I have memorised when doing megaMinx blindfolded. Okay, first of all I'm going to go through how I hold it to start with, and then for corners first, because the corners are easier here. Simply because there are less of them. There are 20 corner pieces and 30 edge pieces, and then I'll show you the same thing for edge pieces. So for the corners, this is how my orientation, my orange on top, yellow in front here. This is symmetrical left, right, so I'm going to show you with my right hand first, and then my left hand's basically doing the same except mirrored. So I have my index finger on this face here, got my thumb on this face, in the centrepiece of these faces, just want to make that clear, and then my ring finger is on this other face that's adjacent to two of them. You can maybe just about see that. So it's these three faces which share this corner, and my ring finger and my pinky are not on the puzzle. For edges and for corners, I start with my pinky near the bottom, either in the middle of this edge or towards the front, but not at the back, because I use pinky to keep track of this piece here. So somewhere underneath, just to help support the puzzle, but not at the back. And left hand's doing basically the same thing, and it might look something like that to start with. So first of all, well, there's 20 pieces, you don't have to keep track of all 20. First of all, this is my buffer piece, I can ignore that, I don't have to trace that in cycles. Secondly, note that you don't actually have to keep track of all non-buffer pieces. If all but one of those pieces is in a cycle somewhere, then it will have been picked up in the cycles. And if it's not in any cycle, then it's either solved already or it's just twisted in place. So you can ignore one other piece. For corners I choose to use this, which is my sort of storage, second buffer, helper buffer, whatever you want to call it. Well, I can ignore it. I actually keep track of it because I have, just because I can, it makes it slightly easier, but I don't have to, and there is a piece I ignore for edges. And if it is flipped in place or twisted in place for corners, then I memo all flipped edges, twisted corners especially anyway, so I'll check the puzzle for those, and if there are any, I'll pick them up then. So you can always ignore your buffer and one other piece. Now, some of you may not be familiar with using fingers to keep track of pieces. I know some people say it makes you slow or don't really do it. I personally find it helps just for breaking into new cycles, binding new pieces, and especially in megaMinx, it's very difficult if you don't keep track of them somehow. Most obvious way is just doing one finger on a piece if you've kept track of it, or not on it if you haven't. You can keep track of two pieces which are next to each other in a similar fashion. Three pieces, especially if the edges around the corner, or something I do on wings, for example. That's something I've figured out. Don't know if other people do that a lot. Maybe some of you do, some of you don't. I also use my feet to help me keep track of pieces. I'll demonstrate that as well. I won't actually show you my feet, that would be very awkward, getting my feet on the table. I'll just demonstrate with my hands what my feet would be doing. And a new trick which I had to do for megaMinx, I didn't have to do it in cubes because the cubes are easy enough to keep track of without doing this. I find that it helps a lot in megaMinx is to keep track of a piece by moving finger from one place onto somewhere else, some other piece, but not onto the piece which I have just memoed. Do something else with it, and I don't actually directly touch that piece because it can get a little bit awkward if you want to try and have your hands covering all the puzzle, it's difficult, I find. It's a little bit confusing at first, it's obviously not intuitive, not directly covering the piece, but I find it makes holding the puzzle far more comfortable during Memo to do that. So, on to applying this to corners. So, first of all, I sort of split up the corners into my head. So you've got the top ones and the bottom ones, and they're all split into sort of pairs of two, one on either the top face or the bottom face, and the one sort of next to them. So that's a pair, that's a pair, that's a pair, that's a pair, and so on. So this pair at the back here, that's buffer I ignore, and this piece which I can ignore but don't, I'll get back to that. This piece here, this pair here, sorry, I keep track of with my right foot, and the rest are all kept track of using fingers. Originally I did a one finger per pair, but I tweaked my system slightly just to make it slightly easier. That's part of the reason this video is later intended. I've actually changed my system slightly since I had intended making that video. Minor changes, but I think they're a little bit more helpful. So back to the grip here. So front pair here on either side, keep track of with my index finger. So just cover one. Say this corner is memoed, I'll put my finger in the centre onto this corner. Similarly for this corner, and if I've memoed both of them, I just put my finger somewhere in between. Simple enough. And for most pairs, that's basically what I use. Corners are rather simple, as I said. So this pair here is the index finger, this pair here would be my ring finger, this pair with my thumb, and it's the exact same system for all of them, and the same on the left hand side. It's all mirrored, it's all symmetrical. So remember, this piece, not this one, my thumb would be here, and vice versa, the thumb would be here, and both it would be there, for instance. The only one I did differently with my fingers. Originally I did this pair at the back just with my ring finger, but I found that sometimes got awkward. So I just do the top one with my ring finger and the bottom one with my pinky. So my ring finger would start here, my pinky would start there, and then just move them across onto the pieces. I actually prefer to have my pinky around the back on this back sticker here. I just find that helps support the puzzle a little bit better, it's more stable. And lastly, that leaves feet. Like I said, I keep track of this pair here with my right foot, so it would originally start off just pointing forward. My hand's twisted at an awkward angle, but bear with me. And one piece corresponds to the front of my foot, one piece corresponds to the back, and I'll just move that part of my foot to the side. So this piece here is the front of my foot, this piece here is the back of my foot. So the front piece, just move the front part of my foot forward. The front part of my foot to the side is the other one. Move the back part of my foot to the side, which I can't really do here because it's very awkward. And if it's both, then I'll move my foot away to somewhere else, or sometimes just go and tiptoe or something. I realise that was an odd demonstration, but it should get the point across of what I do. And because my left foot then isn't doing anything, it's not really needed. Because it's bare, I may as well just keep track of this piece. I use the front part of my left foot to keep track of that one, just to make things a little bit more clear. Why not? My left foot isn't doing anything else, I may as well just use it. Then on to edges. Like I said, the edges are a bit trickier, simply due to the fact that there are more of them. So buffer piece is here. I ignore that. The piece I actually ignore that isn't my buffer is this piece at the back here, just along this back edge. I don't do anything with that one at all. I've explained why I can do that. I'll go over the pieces I memo with my feet first this time, just to get them out of the way. These two pieces on the front layer I use my left foot for, so that all only pieces left in this top layer to keep track of are then symmetrical across from each other, one on the left, one on the right, which helps make my system otherwise symmetrical. With my hands, they'll end up symmetrical at the end. And this piece here, and might be difficult to follow, but the edge piece is right at the bottom, the back here, one exactly opposite this piece here. I keep track of both of those with my right foot. Now on to pieces I keep track of with my fingers. So start with grip like this. Don't have my pinky on it because I use my pinky to keep track of pieces. And it's pieces that are my finger would touch if I just rested it on the puzzle, so that would be confusing, so I have to get my pinky off to start with. So work on the right hand side of the puzzle again. These two pieces here go with my index finger, so just one piece either there or there, and both move them onto the corner sticker. Similarly for these two edges with my thumb, same system. That's the only pieces I do like that. Obviously the same mirrored on the left hand side. 3 edge pieces around this corner. It's a similar system except with 3 edge pieces instead of 2. Just rotate round slightly, so it's this edge, and this edge. This finger starts off not on the puzzle, remember, so just put them on here as necessary. So one piece just on the piece itself, one of those 3. If it's 2 pieces, so say this one and this one, I put them on the corner sticker that's between the two of them. So those two would be this one, that piece and that piece, it would be here. And if it's all 3, then I put it on the point of the corner there, it sticks out. Perhaps helps slightly by the fact this is a ridged megaminx. I know that's a controversial issue. I quite like the ridges. Some megaminx solvers really detest them. I think they're quite nice, and it does help make it distinct when I memoed all 3 having the point there, because it's raised up from the rest of the puzzle. It makes that a bit clearer. Now we get on to the tricky part where I'm not covering pieces directly with my finger, and that gets a bit more confusing. Also slightly more confusing because they're at the back of the puzzle, some of them, and therefore a bit more difficult to show clearly. Hopefully it'll make sense. I'll have some information in the description about this. Just explaining what pieces I cover with what finger and where I put them. Explained in my megaminx notation. I don't know if you read that at all. I posted it in a link to it in my execution video for megaminx blindfolded, the last video. If you haven't, then you might find the notation a little bit difficult to follow because you won't understand it. I recommend you read it just so that you can follow this if you want to have a clear description of this in the description of the video, in case the visual demonstration isn't very clear, which it might not be just because it is so awkward. Okay, so my ring finger, do that first and then pinky, starts off in this centre piece here, and it's keeping track of these 2 pieces. So that's starting orientation, so this piece here and that piece there, so it's face opposite this front face, and it's the ones on the left hand side that I'm keeping track of. But my ring finger starts off here, and getting it there, keeping track of things around this side would be very difficult, very awkward. I tried it, it didn't work. For this piece here, it's just too difficult to keep track of it with putting a finger on it, so I came up with a different approach. So if I just memoed this piece, I put my ring finger here on this piece. If I just memoed this piece but not this one, I put it on this edge sticker instead. So I pretend this piece is here essentially and put it there. That might be a bit confusing because you might think when you've memoed this piece you just have to be a bit careful to start with the system. It's slightly confusing, but I actually adapted it far quicker than I thought I would. It actually was relatively easy to get used to this, so don't freak out and think that this is really confusing. You're going to mess everything up because of it. It's actually not too bad, I found. I went to do it in practice. It didn't take long at all. So really just give it a go if you don't believe me, and if you still don't like it, then fine, go figure out something else. But I think it actually works well. So that piece is just there, for this piece it's there, and then it's sort of similar to the other pieces. If it's both of them, it's on this corner sticker here. And usually when I'm keeping track of this piece with my middle finger, I'd have it on this sticker, and if it's this piece, my ring finger would be here, just so they're not trying to be in the same place. They're slightly different, so I can have my fingers arranged like that. Two different stickers on the same edge piece, but keeping track of different things. A little confusing, I know, but I found it to be very helpful. Okay, the last thing is Pinkie, and this is keeping track of 3 pieces. Again, not always directly on the piece, and this is possibly the most confusing part of all. Originally it was simpler, but I found it was a bit awkward sometimes with that system, and I felt I had to change it just because it was so awkward. And again, I adjusted relatively quickly, quicker than I thought I would, and I found it actually helps. So, keeping track of these 3 edge pieces here, just for reference, just go back to my standard orientation, and it's the pieces around this corner here, that piece, and that piece there. So start off with Pinkie not on the puzzle. If it's one of the pieces at the bottom, just one of them, not any of the other 2, I am happy enough to just put my Pinkie on the piece, rest it underneath the puzzle where I have to, and that's not too difficult. It's slightly more awkward for this one, but perfectly doable with my fingers doing other things. I can manage that. For this one here, however, I found that a little bit awkward. Not all the time, sometimes it's not too bad, but depending on what my other fingers are trying to do, sometimes it gets my hand's trying to twist at an awkward angle. It's uncomfortable to leave it there for a while, so instead I switched to putting it on this corner sticker down here. Just resting it there, I found that to be relatively easy. For 2 out of the 3 pieces, if it's these bottom 2, I will rest it in the corner there, the same way you'd expect. If it's just these 2 pieces, and one of these 2 pieces or both of these pieces and not this one, is exactly what you'd expect on one of the pieces or the corner sticker in between. If it's this piece and this piece, I rest it on. Oops, try not to turn the layer when you do this. You're not meant to turn the puzzle during the memo. I've been close to making mistakes of that a few times. I rest it on this corner this corner sticker here if it's those 2 pieces, and if it's this piece and this piece, I put it around the back of the puzzle here. That's the same place I would put it if I was memoing this corner piece for the corner memo. Around the back there, I find that to be very comfortable. And if it's all 3 pieces, then I'll have it in the point of a corner. Which corner depends on whereabouts my Pinkie is beforehand. If my Pinkie is here, those 2 pieces, and adding in that 3rd one, it'll end up in here, and if it's over here, then it'll end up here. You may wish to just pick one of them, say this one, and always put it there when you've memoed all 3 pieces. I just put it on the point of the closest corner, whichever one my finger ends up on last. I realise that might be slightly confusing, it's a bit of an odd concept. It took a while for me to come up with that idea, and first I didn't think it would work, but then I tried it and it worked, and I'm glad I thought of it. And hopefully you'll find it useful as well. And if you find it too confusing, then you might have to come up with something else. Obviously you might not use the same layout that I do in terms of buffers, for instance, so you may not be able to use this directly, but hopefully some of the ideas here you might not have thought of and that will help you keep track of pieces when you're memoing megamints, because keeping track of pieces so you know where to break into new cycle is very difficult. Even with a system like this, I still find it a bit tricky because sometimes my fingers slip sometimes slightly, and I'm not entirely sure if I have memoed a piece or not, but you just need to be careful to avoid that, really. There isn't really anything else for it. Just practice a little bit and try and be careful about keeping your fingers in the correct place to keep track of pieces so you don't get confused towards the end. And that's it. I think that pretty much completes my tutorial for megamints blindfolded. I may make another video with some other tricks that I do, but I don't think there's anything else that's overly difficult or complicated. Things that you will probably think of anyway. Obviously they're all specific to my system. If you're doing something else, then it might not really work so well for you. But yeah, I'll maybe make that video at some point soon. I'm not sure how long away that will actually be, because I did my last video, I thought I would have this one done, and about 2 days later, and I think that was over a week ago. So that'll probably come at some point, and at some other point I may make a video on Master of Kilominx. I'm still working out some details for that, but when I do get things sorted out, I will probably make a video on it, just because someone might find it useful. I don't know. Yeah, thanks again for watching, and I hope you found this helpful.